Welcome to Raising the Bar. I am Ashley Vargas, and I help lifters feel more confident adding weight to their barbell. Hello, lifters, and welcome to episode number 3 of Raising the Bar. Today, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on training with equipment, specifically consistently training with a weight belt. Before I really dive into that, though, I do want to throw 2 disclaimers out there. Disclaimer number 1, a lot of this is going to be my opinion as a lifter and as a coach. So if you have thoughts that differ from mine, I would actually love to hear them. If you want to type them in the comment section of this podcast, I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. And disclaimer number 2, all of these statements I'm going to make are on the assumption that the lifter does not have any injuries. So if you are lifting with an injury or you're going through rehab or post-injury and you need a weight belt to safely lift, please continue to do so. Again, all these statements are on the assumption that the lifter is injury-free. So as a strength athlete, I think it's crucial that you build and train your core stabilizers before you add a weight belt into your training. I don't think you should touch a weight belt or any type of lifting aid for that matter until you have trained your body to do the exact thing that lifting aid is meant to support, not provide. So the weight belt is really designed for additional lower back support and to help to keep your spine in a neutral position, whether you are doing an upright lift or an overhead lift. So it's not meant to be the primary point of support. The weight belt does have 2 functions. So one is to reduce stress on the low back while the lifter is in an upright position. So a deadlift or a squat, for example. And then the second is to prevent the back from going into a hyperextension doing an overhead lift. So like a snatch or a clean and jerk. The weight belt is probably one of the most overused lifting aids I've seen. I laugh because every single time I go into the gym, I always see someone, or if not one person, multiple, just walking around with a weight belt on. Almost like they're using it as a waist trainer, which is not the purpose of a weight belt. And they, go over to the cables and start doing tricep push-downs with their weight belt on, or they start doing bicep curls with their weight belt on. And quite honestly, if you are not able to maintain a neutral spine while doing either of those 2 movements, or if you're feeling discomfort in your lower back doing those 2 movements, you probably have a lot of mechanical issues going on that need to be addressed. However, with all of that being said, core strength is necessary in any type of movement you ever do. And it is actually necessary in, it's something just as simple and isolated as a tricep extension or a bicep curl. I always tell all of my clients, every single movement that you do is a core exercise if you are bracing properly. So now the question becomes, how do you create core tension in every movement that you do? A cue that I've used several times over is if you were standing here and you saw someone walking up to you and you know that they were going to just come up and punch you in the gut, you would not just stand there all loose, just waiting for the inevitable, right? You would properly brace yourself. You would be ready for that impact. Your body would completely tense up. You would almost expand the stomach instead of pulling that belly button in. You'd want to expand the stomach in order to, protect the internal organs and, reduce the amount of injury that you would sustain as possible. And that's the feeling that you should have anytime you're under a weighted barbell or even doing a bicep curl. You should have that amount of tension in your midsection at all times. So being able to create that and then add weight on top of it and be able to maintain that tension over time, you are going to build up those core stabilizers and build up those core muscles in order to properly support the lower back under a weighted load. The second thing that you're going to need to do in order to train your core to maintain a neutral spine is really isolating your core, but you want to utilize movements that are going to keep your core in that braced position as your limbs move about your core. So some of those exercises are going to include dead bugs, bird dogs, Powerlift presses. And I have links for all of those in my YouTube channel as well. I'll put those in the notes of this podcast. That way you can take a look if you're unfamiliar with those. But Crunches, Russian twist, and other movements that really contract your abs and take your spine out of neutral is not going to translate into core stability and core tension underneath a barbell. So, yes, they create aesthetic abs, but strength athletes aren't going for aesthetic abs. We're going for strong cores. So, in order to do that, those types of movements are not going to translate well because once you do get under a barbell, if you do a crunch with a barbell on you, it's not going to work out very well. You want to be able to train your core to maintain that tension when you are under a heavy load. Once you have learned how to maintain a proper brace under a weighted load, and you've kind of created a baseline strength as far as your core strength and stability goes, you want to start adding that weight belt in, you need to know how to utilize it properly. So once you lock your weight belt in, it doesn't mean we forget about everything that we just trained our body to do. It is not there to replace your brace, it's there to reinforce it. So when you lock that belt in, it's going to feel really, really tight around your midsection. And it's probably only going to allow you maybe two at the most big, deep bracing breaths. And as you take that bracing breath, you want to push your midsection out, kind of push your belly out a little bit, creating as little space in between you and the weight belt as possible. And doing this is actually very uncomfortable. So, which is why I always chuckle a little bit when I see people walking around for an entire training session with a weight belt on, because you shouldn't be able to breathe for that long in that thing. So, which is why I kind of think that it gets utilized more as a waist trainer than anything else. But nevertheless, when you see strength athletes, walking up to the platform, the very last thing that they're going to do right before they step up to their barbell is lock their belt. The very first thing that they do after the lift is completed is unlock their belt right before they turn around to see if they got 3 white lights on their lift. Another thing that you want to keep in mind when you start training with a weight belt is you want to make sure that you are utilizing a weight belt in training that you are able to wear at a competition. So, different organizations have different rules and regulations regarding equipment and what they allow, and what is considered illegal. So, you want to make sure that you are looking at whatever organization you're going to be lifting with, looking at their rule book to see what the guidelines are for all of the equipment that you're going to use. So with weight belts specifically, there's a certain thickness, like it can't be thicker. Again, there's variations through every organization, but there's a limit to how thick it can be. There's a limit to how wide it can be. If you are using a Velcro belt, there is no organization that allows that. You do need to have either a lever or a buckle. So make sure that you are going through and reading that, and make sure that the one that you're training with is going to comply with whatever organization you're going to be lifting with. So I had talked about this a couple episodes back, but you want to make sure that you're keeping all of the variables within your training as close to the variables and the conditions that you're going to have at your meet. So anytime you switch something up or try something different the day of the meet, you have no idea how your body is going to respond to that. And when you get to the meet and you go to equipment check, the last thing that you want is the rest to tell you that you're not allowed to use your weight belt because it doesn't comply with the rules and regulations of the organization, and now you are beltless. So it does not put you in a very good situation at all. So please make sure you are training with something that you know you can compete with. If you are working with a coach, these are all things that your coach should be able to provide some guidance on. So whether or not you should be at this point in your training, should be training with a weight belt. If you do start utilizing one, at what point in your lift, or at what percentage should you put one on, or what volume should you put one on? Which weight belt is going to be best for you. If you are going to be competing, what belt is going to meet the requirements of the organization that you're lifting with, or that even goes for knee sleeves and wrist wraps if you are competing equipped, knee wraps. So they should be able to provide some recommendations there to make sure that you are creating the best training situation possible. I hope you found today's episode helpful, and I hope this caused you to rethink how you're using some of the tools at your disposal. And hopefully, if you are a lifter who is reliant on lifting aids, hopefully you can start to wean yourself off of that. We want to make sure that we are truly testing our body to see what we're really capable of on its own. And then all of those tools are there just to reinforce what our body is already capable of doing. So, the three biggest things that I want you to take away from today's episode One, and I kind of already alluded to this, but one is train your body to move the weight without a lifting aid. Number two, lifting aids are meant to reinforce what your body is already doing. They are not there to be your first line of defense. And then number three, if you are training with a weight belt or knee sleeves or what have you, make sure that it is regulation approved if you're a competitive lifter, either power or Olympic. That way you can create the same conditions within training as what you're going to have at your competition. So if you found this helpful and you think one of your lifting buddies will find this helpful as well, please subscribe and share. I put new episodes out every Wednesday. Next Wednesday, I am going to be getting a little bit more personal, which is something that I don't do very much. But I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my lifting history, how I got into powerlifting, and also how I became a coach. So learn a little bit more about me. I'm also going to put all of my social handles in the notes of this podcast. I do put out daily information, educational tools, and resources. So if you want to follow along and utilize those, please do. Otherwise, I will speak with you all next Wednesday.